Is that the song?
Yes. Will you play it for me?
I do not play.
May I? I assure you I shan't harm it. Can you hear me way over there? You know, on my 10th visit, you might even sit here.
Mr. Townsend, you are very bold.
William Wyler's brilliant 1949 adaptation of Henry James's Washington Square is an enduring study of the consequences when a young woman is raised and wooed without love or consideration. As the Heiress opens, we are hastily reminded that its events took place 100 years hence, as though to assure us no such things could occur today. This is part of what makes it so resonant, as we readily perceive echoes to the present wherever women are treated as property. The story follows the coming of age of Catherine Sloper, daughter to a wealthy doctor who's earned his fortune, a self-made man. Catherine is plain, shy, and lacks talent or charm.
Good morning, Father.
Good morning, Catherine.
I bought a fine fish for the chowder you like.
That's very thoughtful. Next time, let the man carry it in for you.
Oh, yes, Father.
Coming.
Her one skill is needlepoint, which is not seen as a legitimate pursuit for a young and eligible heiress.
I can't, Father. I have some embroidery I'd like to attend to.
Ah, yes.
It's immediately clear that her father views her as a kind of perverse substitute for his deceased and much admired wife. He's constantly berating Catherine and making disparaging comparisons between her evident lack of qualities and the superfluous ones of her mother.
I thought you would like the color.
Yes,
It's cherry red.
so it is.
I believe my mother used to wear it in her hair ribbons, Austin.
Ah, yes. But Catherine, your mother was fair. She dominated the color. Well, I must dress. She's gone to the best schools in the city. She's had the finest training I could get her, music and dancing. She sat with me evenings on end. I've tried to make conversation with her and give her some social adeptness. I've given her freedom wherever I could. The result is what you see. An entirely mediocre and defenseless creature with not a shred of poise.
Here's a woman whose upbringing has left her defenseless. Her father bemoans her lack of brilliance, but what avenues has he made available for her to explore or excel in? Her lack of aptitude for the piano is a source of grief to him, but the one area she has been permitted to excel, where her inclinations lie, the needlework, he disparages.
Is Catherine starting another of these things?
Yes, she embroiders beautifully.
I hope she doesn't let it become a life's work.
Who knows what potential she is leaving undeveloped for lack of opportunity? For him, her only value is in whatever capacity she may have to resemble her mother, which is not great. It's also indicative of an unhealthy attitude in him, seeing her as he seems to as some kind of consolation prize for the loss of his beloved wife.
You remember her mother, Liz? Her mother who had so much grace and gaiety. This is her child.
Not a person unto herself, but a kind of poor replacement that can never measure up in his esteem. And this finds reflection in her self-image in an irreversible way. In many great stories, there's a sequence that encapsulates the breadth of the narrative, sometimes in simplified terms, sometimes by means of allegory. In this story, the party attended by Catherine where she first meets Morris Townsend is a brief synopsis of the story as a whole.
Oh, Quintus, you're not dancing.
No, ma'am.
You remember Catherine Sloper, my niece?
Yes, indeed. May I have the pleasure, Catherine?
Thank you, Quintus. Excuse me, Father.
May I get you some claret cup?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Catherine attends without enthusiasm or much hope of attracting notice. Out of nowhere, Morris plies her with insistent compliments and protestations of affection.
Good evening, Mrs. Penniman.
Good evening. Catherine, dear, may I present Mr. Morris Townsend?
How do you do, Miss Sloper?
Mr. Townsend's Alpha's cousin, dear, and he's just returned from Europe. How do you do, sir?
Would you have a dance for me, Miss Sloper?
I believe she has a waltz left. Excuse me, dear. There is Miss A.B.
Miss Sloper, we must make an arrangement. I will not kick you if you will not kick me.
Oh, dear, I'm so clumsy.
No, it's only that I'm wearing Arthur's boots. He's a very bad dancer.
Oh.
Now, 1, 2, 3, point. 1, 2. Are you warm? Let me get you some claret cup.
Oh, no.
Are you a member of the Temperance League?
Yes, I believe I am.
Oh. Well, I'm not. Will you excuse me for a moment?
And then, seemingly, he abandons her. Being accustomed to this, and having low self-esteem, Catherine assumes he is not sincere, and opts to be absent upon his return. Morris is left unsatisfied and in a state of dismay. These same turns of event will be reflected in the plot to come. Whether Morris's disappointment is genuine may be subject to interpretation, but the fact that Catherine is left unfulfilled is not. She suffers as a consequence of her lack of self-worth, and this will persist through the story's end.
Oh, Catherine, is that you? Yes, Aunt. You have a visitor, young lady. Good morning.
It is a beautiful morning for me now, Miss Sloper. But I was afraid you might not come back at all.
I would have to come back sometime. I live here.
I know you do, Miss Sloper. That is why I'm here.
So when Morris persists in visiting her, expressing interest and affection, Catherine can scarce believe her luck. Nor can her father, who assumes the young man to be a fortune hunter after the doctor's goods.
He loves me, and I love him. It is a great wonder to me that Morris has come into my life. Oh, Father, don't you think he is the most beautiful man you've ever seen?
Well, he's very good looking, my dear. Of course, you wouldn't let a consideration like that sway you unduly.
Oh, no, but that is what is so wonderful to me, that he should have everything a woman could want. And he wants me. She is very shy.
Yes, she is.
Perhaps she is less shy with Morris.
And as observers, much as we may be inclined to wish Catherine well, we can't help but suspect her father is right.
Well, I can only suppose that Morris is more mature in his feelings than I'd thought. This time he has not sought out superficial charms. Perhaps he's considered the gentle character underneath.
Are you being honest?
I think I am.
But I believe her money is the prime attraction.
You think I'm an idler?
It doesn't matter what I think. Once I tell you, I just don't think of you as a son-in-law.
You think I'd squander her money?
Ah, I plead guilty to that.
Because I spent my own, I suppose.
But here we find the crux of the story, as the two men are confronted by one another's resolve. At its core, the Heiress is a story about two men engaged in a battle for the affections of Catherine Sloper, where the spoils are the fortune of the older man.
Doctor, don't you care to gratify your daughter? Do you enjoy the idea of making her miserable?
I'm resigned to her thinking me a tyrant for a few months.
Catherine, in this, is reduced to the status of a linchpin that both must possess in order to control the wealth attached to her. She becomes an object that both men largely disregard while earnestly engaged with one another.
I have a great deal at stake.
I know, and you have lost it. It is over.
I wouldn't be too sure of that, sir.
You are impertinent.
It's suggested that perhaps Dr. Sloper ought to have allowed Catherine even the falsehood of an imaginary love, that being better than a single life, in the knowledge of her father's contempt.
Catherine, are you blaming me because I tried to protect you?
Yes.
Someday you'll realize I've done you a great service.
I can tell you now what you have done. You have cheated me. You thought that any handsome, clever man would be as bored with me as you were. It was not love that made you protect me. It was contempt.
Morris Townsend did not love you, Catherine.
I know that now, thanks to you.
Better to know it now than 20 years hence.
Why? I lived with you for 20 years before I found out you didn't love me. I don't know that Morris would have hurt me or starved me for affection more than you did. Since you couldn't love me, you should have let someone else try.
It's hinted at that his own regard for her deceased mother may have been in no small part illusory.
Austin, no child could compete with this image you have of a mother. You've idealized that poor dead woman beyond all human recognition.
You're not entitled to say that. Only I know what I'd lost when she died. What I got in her place.
And that in refusing Morris's proposal, he is denying her a kind of deluded happiness he has himself enjoyed.
I think we shall marry quite soon.
Then it is no further concern of mine.
I'm sorry.
Dr. Sloper, you cannot marry without your approval. It would bring unhappiness to all of us.
Do you mean that, sir?
Yes.
Then will you put it off, Mr. Townsend, for 6 months? I would like Catherine to go to Europe with me.
Europe?
I would like you very much to go, Catherine.
Why, Father?
Your father thinks you will forget me, Catherine.
I shall still love him when I come back.
You're very sure of your love, but Catherine, do you dare to test him?
You underestimate him.
I don't think so. How do you keep busy since your return to New York, Mr. Townsend?
I'm looking for a position.
Well, your studies abroad should open many avenues to you.
I engaged in those studies, Mrs. Penniman. I was merely idling.
The reason he is unable to make that concession is that he cannot bear to be bested by a transparent rogue like Morris Townsend. He will not see the fortune he has worked to amass fall to a worthless man, and his own daughter's happiness becomes a tangential issue to be dismissed out of hand.
I know nothing of you but what I see, but I see that you're extremely intelligent.
Oh, yes.
Thank you very much. You advised me then not to despair.
I should be very sorry to admit that a robust, well-disposed man need ever despair. If he doesn't succeed in one thing, he can try another. Only he should choose with discretion.
But you see, he's earned all this by his work. He believes that every man should do the same. The trouble is that some of us cannot.
In the absence of the Slopers proper, Morris all but installs himself in their home, enjoying the doctor's cigars, and thus absconding symbolically with the older man's fortune and emasculating him at the same time. But the truth is, we never know for certain what Morris feels. We can be fairly certain that he has ulterior motives in pursuing Catherine, but that's not to say there's no genuine affection for her in his heart. And after all, it may be our own cynicism that allows us to paint him the villain.
That's what I like you for. You're so honest.
You miss her, don't you, Morris?
Very much.
In the face of this disregard, Catherine comes to understand that her neediness in regards to her father's approval has led her to a naive viewpoint, where she will accept any semblance of affection as evidence of legitimate love. Having made that connection, she now sees that she's also been hoodwinked by Morris.
Catherine, it was because I loved you that I disappeared that night. Oh, I know how it looked. It looked as if I behaved abominably. But I knew that if I returned that night, I might have done you great harm. You know, my dear, no man who really loves a woman could ever permit her to give up a great inheritance just for him. That's only in storybooks.
When he flees to America rather than eloping with Catherine, he may have it in mind to make his fortune, intending to return triumphant and impeccable, above reproach or accusation for his interest in her, his own fortune making hers irrelevant. It's not impossible.
Try to understand me, Catherine. Try not to think of what it looked like, but of what it was. I had to make a choice. I chose your welfare rather than my own. Can you think of it that way?
I will try.
Why don't you come up this August? You'd love Newport, and Jefferson and I have taken a big house this year.
Well, maybe I will.
We've asked you every year since your father died. You always say, maybe I will, and then you never do.
I like the square.
Here, Catherine has come into possession of her father's estate, his worth falling not to a rival, but to her. And included in this fortune is possession of herself. Some see in this a woman coming into her strength, leaving the men who'd hurt her forlorn and withered. But what I see is a generous, loving soul turned hard, even cruel through ill treatment.
He came back with the same lies, the same silly phrases. What are you saying? He has grown greedier with the years. The first time he only wanted my money. Now he wants my love, too. Well, he came to the wrong house, and he came twice. I shall see that he never comes a third time.
They have behaved as though she were a mere object, and in the end she is bereft of humanity, cold and aloof. This is not a triumph, but a tragedy.
Can you be so cruel?
Yes, I can be very cruel. I have been taught by masters. Bolt it, Mariah.
Bolt it?
Bolt the door, Mariah.
In the end, Catherine gives up even needlepoint, the one enjoyment in her life. Reveling in the sounds of Morris's distress, she voluntarily entombs herself.
Catherine! Catherine! Catherine!
As she withdraws into the upper recesses of her father's house, where he malingered, she too will eventually perish, a spiteful and lonely centerpiece of his wasted legacy.
Catherine! Catherine! Catherine!
The Heiress is an efficient story, expertly told. There are no wasted opportunities, and every moment drives the story forward. Weiler has been noted for his use of props, and he often employs the objects present as storytelling elements. Dr. Sloper's cigars are more than just cigars, as can be observed by the alternately angry and flaccid way he employs them, depending on whether he's confronting an enemy, the memory of his wife, or the disappointment of his daughter.
And you are so good that you will be fair and honest with him.
I shall be as fair and honest with him as he is with you.
Thank you, Father.
Why is it you always win?
I cheat.
Catherine's attempts to conceal her empty dance cards from Morris reveal both her insecurity and her lack of popularity, and are answered by his own gesture of listing her for every available dance.
Sloper, I consider that you do me a great honor. You see, I'm rather choosy, too.
This allows her to join the pretense that they have mutually chosen to shun other potential candidates. Thus, the objects create an intimacy between them.
You left your gloves here yesterday.
Thank you.
Ah, Catherine. I haven't seen you since our return.
No, Father.
Here, Catherine is refusing to directly acknowledge her father, forcing him to deal only with her reflection in one of his ornate mirrors. This both allows her emotional distance and acknowledges his perception of her as an object. Indeed, Catherine herself frequently seems to almost vanish into the surrounding decor as the people around her discuss her future, her character. They pay her no more attention than a well-worn item of furniture.
I told Miss Sloper earlier, I'm very candid.
Oh, yes, he is. Very candid.
The performances in the Heiress are uniformly great, and there is real nuance in each portrayal. Ralph Richardson dominates, his Dr. Sloper a tortured mess, dressed in propriety and precision. One gets a real sense that his insults for Catherine are almost involuntary. He simply can't bear the loss of his wife, and he can't help but lash out as Catherine reminds him daily of what he'd loved and is forever gone. His concern for her is genuine, but his utter disregard for her feelings reveals a deeper resentment. She is his in his view, and although in the end he cannot bring himself to disown her, he has already lost her emotionally, and the two part without affection.
I don't want to disinherit my only child.
I know that you don't. You'd like to think of me sitting in dignity in this handsome house, rich, respected, and unloved. But I may take your money and chase after Morris and squander it on him.
I don't know what you'll do, Catherine.
That's right, Father. You'll never know. Will you?
Olivia de Havilland is brilliant as well, her transformation from naive simplicity to hardened cynicism utterly convincing. It's heartbreaking to see the mean-spirited spinster, knowing as we do the capacity for innocence and love that has been stymied within her.
Dr. Isaac says you better come now. Your father is very low, miss. He wants you, miss.
I know he does. Too late, Mariah.
You know, I think of you constantly.
I'm not very good at this kind of conversation.
Neither am I.
And Montgomery Clift rides the line throughout, seemingly unsure of himself in his sincerity or lack thereof. He's not a simple mercenary, and when we see him in the end pounding with futility on Catherine's locked doors, we get the sense that he really does despair upon losing her, perhaps finally aware that it is he who is unworthy in their pairing.
But here with you, I sound like a fool.
I don't think so.
You don't? Well, if ever you do think so, if ever I sound high-blown or false, put it down to that, will you?
I will try.
And so everyone loses in the end. Dr. Sloper dies with neither his daughter's affection nor a meaningful legacy. Morris is left impoverished in both material and spiritual senses. Catherine has only the strength to insist upon her isolated dotage, convinced beyond recovery of her own lack of value.
You look very handsome in it.
Thank you.
It's such a hot night. Would you mind if Cook and I took a stroll in the square?
Mariah, you are as free in this house as I am. When you want a small favor, you need not blandish me with false compliments.
In this, I see not the triumph of a strong woman made independent, but the tragic fallout of a clash between two men, unable to see her as more than just a possession.
You like this house, don't you, Morris?
Yes, ma'am, I do. You know, the doctor is a man of fine taste. It's strange that although we do not like each other, we seem to like the same things.
Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and check out the other videos on my channel.